All right. Thanks for joining us here with the United Goalkeeping Alliance, the Goalkeepers podcast. And today we have Coach Jeff Tackett out of Southern California. Jeff, please tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, and what do you do?
Okay. Well, thanks again for having me. So my name is Jeff Tackett. The I own Southern California School of Goalkeeping. It's an academy just with the label school in it. I direct a club out here in Empire Soccer Club. And so in Southern California, we stay pretty busy, and we're able to. It's fun to kind of sometimes be able to do the goalkeepers, but at the same time get to see the team part of it. So I get to wear both hats, and I get to use my platform to push these coaches to learn a little bit more about goalkeeping than maybe the directors that don't have the goalkeeping background. So I get to be that little advocate without them knowing that I'm pushing my own agenda, right? So it's great.
Yeah, it's funny because like I'll go out, like I direct where I'm at, and a couple of the coaches, I assist a couple of the teams, and I'll do goalkeeper training. So a couple of the other coaches are watching me do what I do, and they're like, "Well, when can you come train my team? You know, when can you train my goalkeeper?" And you're right. You know, we as goalkeeper coaches, goalkeepers have to advocate and kind of continue the work, right? Just make sure that our goalkeepers are getting what it is that they need, help wise, technical, tactical, all that good stuff. And today, you know, we're talking about mental health, and we're dealing with um, different areas of it, right? So today specifically, we're dealing about how it is that we engage in mental health from a team perspective and then an individual perspective. So, first and foremost, why is mental health, mental well being important to you?
Well, I mean, it should be something that's important to all, right? I think we're getting to the point where it's out in the forefront. For me personally, I've in my 9 to 5 job, I guess you could call it, my benefits job, I like to say once in a while. I've been involved in the mental health realm for over 20 years. And so I've been able to see and learn that side of it and see how the professionals are able to manipulate and be able to get people in the understanding as a team in a business or as a team in a facility to educate and make sure everyone has an idea of what mental health really means and to get away from those stigmas of what it is. And so that's been kind of a blessing in itself for me to take that into the coaching realm of how we treat others, how do we treat all, how we look into possible triggers that might be happening, or just in a way to be able to see the human and not just the sport, right? So being able to do that, both sides of that field, really did open my eyes on seeing that okay, there's a better way than just being the coaching in your face, screaming and just they need to come to us, my side, instead of me listening to what does the player actually have to say. So it's that getting away from that whole point of it, I think, is huge for me to see, and I think it would help the mental health starting. You start to see at least people being okay with it and opening it up and having conversations, right? I'm sure we'll get more into that, but it's more of the comfort level of I'm able to talk to my coach, not just get yelled at by my coach, or only go talk to my coach when I'm maybe not playing. So now all of a sudden it's a hard talk, right? It's not something I want to do. So it's just breaking down those barriers and those walls. Oh, sorry. That
It's okay.
we're able to just anything else. I have an injury in my leg. I talk about it and I get the help. So why can't I have the same help before it becomes a crisis of the mental health? So
So, do you think that the word mental health or mental well being gets tossed around flippantly? Do you think there is substance to the meaning of those words? What do you think of when somebody says mental health or mental well-being?
Yeah, I think the word in itself has always almost been in a negative slang, like they'll that person's mental, right? So that made has always made a negative like, notion to it instead of understanding what the health of mental is, just our mentality inside, what's going on for the inside, not so much of what the stigma, what people always say so many years in the past that you know even going to see a psychologist is looked down upon instead of just like if I'm going to see a trainer, I'm fixing myself, right? So just the word itself has a negative stigma for so many years that I think the more that people accept it and understand that it's just another way of keeping healthy, that it'll do much better.
Yeah, and now how does mental well-being, mental health play into what we do with goalkeepers? How are they intertwined? Where do they meet? Talk to me a little bit about that and your experience with that.
Um, as a goalkeeper, that's the rough one because we do have to be in a good place, and we have to be the tough skin and be able to understand what they say, that the short memory, because it's we are in the spotlight. If things go wrong, there is nobody to correct our mistake. It's us getting the ball out the back of the net, right? So at that point in time, there is a difference, and there's again that stigma is there is a huge difference between mental toughness and just like mental being, right? So you use the word mental toughness, and people think, okay, well, if they're not tough mentally, then they must be a mess, and we can't use them. But the word mental toughness doesn't really mean that stigma, right? It's more of, again, can I push myself a little bit harder to get to the next level, to be tougher? So can I trick myself even to the point of, am I dead? I can't run another half a mile. Well, can I trick myself mentally to say, well, let me just go one more lap? Let me go, okay, I made it. Let me go another lap. That's becoming in itself, you're mentally training yourself to be a little bit tougher. And even the point of a goalkeeper, your goals happen. So instead of us getting to the point where we're beating ourselves up for it, it should be more of, okay, well, great, it happened. So it's a teaching moment. How do I learn from that? What could I have done better next time? So that becomes, you're tweaking yourself on to becoming mentally strong by saying, okay, that's fine. It happened. Now I use it as a teaching moment. What could I do better? And then next time I do get a goal scored, I don't have a shutdown. I'm not having anything where I'm getting out of my game and making it look like I'm not in control. And then I get to the point where I use it as a positive. And so I think being able to get us into that realm of it and making sure that we understand what the word really should mean, or that phrase, and making it once again into a positive, I think it'll help the goalkeeper itself, and then also all involved with the goalkeepers' lives, right? Or even just all athletes in general, right? It's not just a goalkeeper problem. We're talking about goalkeepers, but it is a point where that I think that word is loosely used.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And now, what I mean, I think we could kind of agree that like the education of it, the use of it, the use of professionals in this field, uh, within teams, within clubs, has improved. We're not where we want to be, nowhere near where we want to be, but there's at least some sort of awareness there. So, how do you think that clubs, high school programs, college programs, even professional programs or professional academies, how do you think they should or could um, have a program that would help not only the teams but the individuals of that system or program?
Yeah, no, it is something that it's a big job, and it's a big cultural change that does need to happen. Where there should be in services, there should be professionals coming in and just giving maybe talks, or if we talk at the college level, where it's a little bit easier, where you can during our whole bring in for our once we get into our days of training, there should be one of the days in the class that maybe a professional for psychology or whatever it might be that's able to discuss mental health and its positivities and what you could do to keep yourself. The big thing is teaching and educating all of us that we all drop below a baseline. We all have emotion, that's fine. But how do we able to get to the point where we don't go into a crisis mode, right? And so it's okay to feel one way. It's okay to feel angered. So it's okay to feel low. But the more I think people have some type of hearing of these classroom discussions or hearing other stories of maybe athletes from the past that come back to you, teachers now that come back to you that are able to say, it's okay. It's okay to feel like this. And here's a few tools to maybe get around it. And then be able to get a point where do you have a peer group that even just the peers could talk. And I think the more and more that everybody talks openly and the stories happen from all abouts, then people feel less secluded to like, oh, I'm the only one that feels this way. I'm the only one that's angered or depressed and no, there's many of us, right? All of us go through it. It's just, how do we not go into, like I said, that crisis mode? So if we're able to educate and get the kids for first part, just to know that it's okay. And then it's very important, I think, that the coaches understand it. The coaches need to be educated, because the coaches then is that trickle down effect that, hey, we're gonna have a talk about that today. Just, I understand it. I am as a teacher, as a coach, this should be no different than, we're mandated reporters for anything, right? So if we see anything out of the ordinary, we as a teacher or a coach are supposed to report quickly, right? If anything happens. So there should be no reason why we can't get into the culture of being able to have the education for the coaching staff or the teaching staff, that you're able to not be a psychologist. You don't need a psychologist for every little thing, but just to be able to notice it, be a little bit more aware, to open up, to just to make sure that everyone feels a little bit more open and adequate, that it's okay, right? So it always comes back to the whole thing of it's okay. We all go through it. Instead of making people feel alone.
Yeah, and the one thing that you bring up with what you were saying, or at least what came up for me, was that I think when we have a physical injury, say it's an arm or a leg or something, I would say unless it's something very very minor, you'll be out a day or two, maybe weeks or months, depending on the severity of the injury. Um, with mental health, it's almost kind of like, okay, you got it out, let's move on. Why do you think we're so quick to brush things off when it comes to our inside, where we're very patient with the healing process on the outside?
Right. Well, yeah, it's a great question, because I think it's still the unknown, right? I think there's so much not to know about it. And there was also just the stigma of, I mean, us growing up, and just, it's still out there that you just get over it, right? So our mindset, as a lot of our peers in the coaching world from past and present, is, oh, just, suck it up. You need to be more mentally strong, right? So there goes that word again, where they use it in the wrong context, right?
Right.
So they're thinking that we need to be more mentally strong, and or it is looked down upon, like everybody has a bad day, get over it. You know what I mean? So it's, instead of being like, okay, you're having a bad day, I understand, let's figure it out, maybe take a day off, and what do you need? And but there is no program, or there's nothing is set in place for that. Like you're saying, they just get over it, and maybe they take a day off, and now what? Right? So there is nothing in place for that. So that's definitely important.
So as we move away from talking about teams and going to individuals, how does that now, how do the processes change, right, or the processee change when we're looking at not addressing maybe a group, or painting, paying, giving giving a tool, right, to a group of players. How do we go from that to now individualizing um, that type of information to the people who need it? I know that as coaches, a lot of times we create IDPs, or whatever you want to call them. A very individually driven um, periodization, where there's development and there's a pathway to getting to where you want to go. A lot of times that does not include the mental side of the game, the mental well-being. So how do we go from a standard team kind of addressing it to now addressing it to an individual?
All right. But that's a great point too that you bring up, because ironically, even when we're taught as coaches, we have those 4 pillars, right? The technical, tactical, physical, and mental, psychological. So, and it's even in the IDPs, right? You see those 4 pillars, but it's the mental's not ever addressed to what we were thinking of now. What our talk is, the mental is more, how do you become stronger mentally? How do you have the leadership qualities? That's kind of what they think of, instead of what you're saying. What is our plan when we have a bad game? What is our plan when we have a good game? What was the plan when we have a bad month? So it's there's a way, and like I said, there's already a tool in place. It's just now, can we tweak the culture of making sure it's understood that, hey, mental health is part of that pillar of mental, the psychological part of it. So let's put something in there. And individually, I think even as a coach putting that in, it would make the player feel a little bit less of a wall of, oh, okay, we're already discussing like a mental health type issues or goals. So if something is going on, I don't have to be as afraid to come to the coach or talk about it, because we're all having these talks. So once again, it just comes full circle of the more that the open lines are available and everybody is able to talk about it, then the individual feels a little bit better off. And again, the individual doesn't feel secluded, that they're the only ones it's happening to. But then at the same time, that's where the coaching education and just education for us in now is important, that we do recognize that there's certain things that you don't generalize as a group, when the individual definitely knows that you're talking about them, right? There's definitely times where you don't call out the individual in the group if you know your player and you know where they're at in their realm of what's going on with them in their life or whatever it might be. So there's times where at that point in time, are we knowledgeable with ourselves, of our team and our players, to know, okay, this needs to be an individual discussion. This is no longer, we've already laid the foundation for the group to be comfortable to talk. And then if the individual does want to talk, great. But at the same time, now we should also be able to see some type of triggers, see some type of dropping down below those baselines where we could approach and talk to the player individually after practice or whatever it may be, whatever it needs to be, so that we can continue to have the I guess that platform where, like you said earlier, it's not just like, okay, you had a bad day, get over it, I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, so it's continuing to, and that's the hard part. Who's going to make that plan? And it realistically, I think it has to come from the organization, the league itself. The leagues should implement some type of education that the coaches have to stand by. I mean, we already do. I don't that we as coaches have to go through the percussion or the cardiac arrests, the concussions, all the safe sport, certain things. And it's odd that we're having this talk because I just went through all that, the refresher courses. There's really nothing about mental health in what we're saying, right, at all. So it's interesting that they're putting this out there. And the reason they put it out there is because, unfortunately, people have passed away from cardiac arrest on the fields.
Right.
Had the concussion so bad that they've been not able to play ever again. So they've named that. We've had the issues on harassment or bullying or inappropriate activity, but the mental health or the suicide rate amongst our athletes is so out there. Like it's unbelievable that this has not been addressed still. And I think it has to at least start from the organizations, the leagues, and saying you need to be able to do these courses so at least you have an idea of what this means. Because I go back to my training for just like in my field for what I do for a living, and just to have to do those yearly block training, they call it, just a refresher every year. You're just like, oh wow, that's true. Like, it just makes you think differently and be able to adapt and learn, and not just be like, oh, I just gotta go through this course again and we move on. So it's definitely has to come from up top and trickle down.
How what age do you think we should start teaching this to kids, or at least making it a part of their repertoire, right? Because I think part of it too is we teach it, or they start to learn of it, to learn about it, um, way too late, or by the time they're learning it, they should already have, not only learn it but know how to use it as well. Because there's knowledge and then there's applied knowledge, right? So I think if we teach some of this stuff a little bit earlier, it would help, maybe not prevent things from happening, or but I think it'll certainly at least open more eyes, and even with the kids, even start teaching compassion, empathy, sympathy, all that stuff. At what age do you think would you start addressing this?
Right. I mean, to your point earlier, I mean, if we're gonna start these kids playing club at age 8, 7 now, I see some teams go at 7, but at 8, in that time, 8 or 9 years old, once again, we go back to using the IDP, right? There's a component on there which is the psychological mental part of it. So even at a young age, they're having to go through emotions of anger and not being able to do something when, let's say, they came from a rec league where they were a star, but now they're playing with the rest of kids that are just as good. So now they're not as good, and they struggle, and they're not the star anymore, and they feel that anxiety possibly of going out there and not being able to perform, the anger because they can't perform or others can't perform. So there's even at that age, there's that component of, being able to discuss that. Because if I, as an 8-year-old player, am yelling at you because you can't trap a ball, or you let a goal in, or you didn't score, now not only does that kind of get in that bullying that they supposedly talk about, what about the mental health of you, where you're being ridiculed and put down for something that, we're all trying to learn, right? So I think once they become in that club age, it should already be hit where they're understanding the mental side of it, that it's okay to make the mistakes. And once again, it's okay to go to your coach and ask the why, and not just be afraid of the coach. And so I think that even starts the whole platform and changing the culture, that if you do it at an earliest age, then it gets to the point where everybody's on the same page as we get older. So definitely.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that. I mean, I think for me, there doesn't have to be this like standard system of what we teach, when we teach it, how, like it can be that way, and that would be very helpful. I know it would be helpful to me, but there's also something to be said for, in the IDPs, in that process of developing the individual, um, creating a culture of teaching good habits, teaching compassion, teaching togetherness, teaching empathy, all that stuff within the team setting, while remaining competitive, while remaining, um, while developing, while looking to win. So you can, so it's not, you can teach one thing and not this, right? You can teach it all. You just have to be also comfortable teaching it. And I think that starts with what you said. It starts at the top, and it starts with a culture change, where that becomes something that it's important, right? In Germany, I think a couple of years ago, I think when they lost, I think they didn't qualify for the world for the group stage or something. When they came back, one of the first things they did was they started building parks everywhere, and they changed the entire infrastructure, and it was a culture change that was accepted right away. And it wasn't whether it was right or wrong, right? This is what we're doing. We're doing it as a group. We're gonna make it important. And again, you see it done in other countries, in other for other things. And I think we can create that sort of culture and shift in mindset here as well. So yeah, you bring up a lot of great points. Um, so as we wrap up here, is there anything that you would like to say to coaches, parents, or kids who are listening to this, um, that may be just looking for some advice, or anything else that you could add to how to treat mental wellness from a team and an individual perspective?
Yeah, well, no, just to piggyback on what you just said on that, I think it's even the persona of that word win, right? I think in our culture, winning's so important to the point of if anybody says we're developing, of course I'm developing to win, but I need to develop you to do it correctly so we can win.
Yep.
But I think even the word win, the parents are just as guilty of all this as some of our coaches, but they want to win, and if they don't win, they leave, right? They leave and go to a different club or find somewhere where it feels more competitive and more that desire to win. But even at that point in time, now you have parents pushing this agenda of win, where then it gets to the kid's mind where, again, if you or I are little and we're messing up, is that player going to be a little bit more pushy, a little bit more because their parent wants that competitiveness and thinks that we need to win now, so why can't you score a goal, or why can't you catch that ball and not get scored on? And it's counterproductive to what we as a group are trying to do. So it's, as we get through all this, not only are we trying to create the culture within our sports, from the coaches, the players, but it really is a big one to come to the parents. Right? So that's, the parents are really need to get on board on this, because they are just as guilty as anybody of telling them to suck it up, to, you're fine, get out there. And it's, and the ones that do say, oh, they're having a little issues today, they're looked as weak as the team. So the parents, it is one thing we really want the education for. I feel if we all step up and push this and make sure it's understood, I think the parents will fall in line and understand that it's not just one club doing it, so we want to go somewhere else where the club's more competitive. No, this is a generational change culturally, and that all sports, that we all need to be on the same page. So it is going to be that trickle down effect that if they all see it, they all will fall in line. But it can take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of cohesiveness, right? There's going to need, for us as our staff, for players, I think it's just, again, being able to tell the stories, the older ones, being able to tell stories to the younger ones, and so that the younger ones are our generation, that they change the culture. Well, they feel better about it, and they can take their mental health and make it into a positive and know how to grow from it. And even as the goalkeeper, right, individual, it's hard to have the spotlight on us, just like any sport, the quarterback, the pitcher, any of the star type player that would be on individual sports. We don't really talk about them as much, like the tennis players, the gymnasts. They are the star, right, of their team. And so the mental health on that part of it is making sure that they all understand that it is okay. It's just, it always comes back down to, I think, the main part is, it's okay, so let's figure it out. It's okay that you sprained your ankle, we could fix it,
Right.
if you take the proper protocol, or you're just going to have it happen again, right? So we've taught that, we see that because it's tangible. We could see our ankle was messed up.
Right.
So it's just getting the professionals out there to be able to show the coaches, the players, the parents our organization something tangible of how we could show the mental health, and that's going to be huge. And I hope they step up. I'm, to be honest with you, surprised that that culture hasn't stepped up more and pushed the agenda towards the sports
Right.
because it's happening so much. But I don't know. Maybe there's a pushback that we don't know about. So
Yeah, and it's again right. There's no one. I think the most important part of all of this is just the consciousness. Now that we brought it up to a conscious state, and we're all talking about it, now solutions are being created, and solutions are being created in all different parts of the world. I'm sure, country and the world. Um, Now it's a matter of like scaling it and figuring out what's the best way to address this. But I think surely but slowly, like you said, it's going to get looked at, and it's going to be kind of the norm to look at mental health, mental well-being as and it is, and actually it is currently at the highest levels, right? Where there's a certain part of it where that is part of performing at an elite level. So um thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you, appreciate your time. And yeah, thanks for hopping on, and we will talk to you soon.
thank you for having me. Take care.